All right, and we are live on the air. My name is Jared, and I am here with my friend Steven. Say hello, Steven.
Hi, everybody.
And we're going to talk about the DC cinematic universe today. We are we're both kind of jumping into podcasting right about the same time. A couple of our buddies, Ford and Judah, are doing a podcast. It's called Reverse Redaction. I'll probably throw the link in the description down below. But we kind of have a lot of the same interests and don't want to hijack theirs. So we're going to get into doing some of these too. Steven, is DC Cinematic Universe even the right term for it? We've got Marvel Cinematic Universe. Has DC actually, or Warner Brothers actually branded this something official?
I don't know if Warner Brothers has put the stamp on it, but the most commonly used term I hear for it is the DCEU, like the DC Extended Universe, I think is what the E stands for. So they didn't even have the word cinematic in theirs, which is, I mean, it's par for the course, but I won't put the cart before the horse here.
Yeah, that's what I saw online, and I wasn't sure if that referred to the comics also, or if that was just specifically their movie universe.
My impression is that it's just the films, but I could be wrong. I certainly don't know them in and out the way I do other topics. So,
right. So I don't know what your feelings on the format are here, but I think the only logical way to do this is the way almost everyone else on the internet does this, is like one of us needs to be a Marvel fanboy and one of us needs to be a DC fanboy, and then we just spend the next hour insulting each other. Doesn't that seem like probably the best format?
That does seem like the most common format I come across. It's a shame because, you can't help but compare the two properties because they're running parallel with one another. But at the same time, I've heard of very few people just take a step back and just relish in the notion that, when we were kids, we wanted films that we could have had that represented our childhoods, took the form of like Super Mario Brothers and
right.
like, some really, so for those of you who never saw the 1993 Mario Brothers movie, it was terrible. But all that to say that even though there is, in my opinion, a clear winner and runner up right now in this competition, I'm thankful that we're even living at a point where a Justice League movie or a Wonder Woman movie or potentially an Aquaman movie, I think, can actually be a reality and not a like sci-fi movie of the week,
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, I guess maybe the original Spider-Man trilogy kind of started to change things, in which when I was a kid growing up, my two comics that I really read were Spider-Man and X-Men. So I wasn't a huge DC fan. I didn't have anything against it. I enjoyed picking up one of those once in a while, but really it was just Spider-Man and X-Men that I was really into. And I guess it was Spider-Man, the first trilogy, that kind of started to get us into the more realistic, mature comic book movies. Of course, I've got a lot of issues with that trilogy that are irrelevant. But now we've kind of progressed on to these cinematic universes, and since Marvel had so much success with theirs, now DC's trying to sort of pattern theirs after that. Of course, they started out with the Nolan Batman trilogy, which was kind of a separate thing too. So, like you said, though, I'm just glad that we've gotten to a point where we can actually have this sort of thing. I would have never guessed that we would actually get to this point. And not only that, but that comic book movies would be what's taking over theaters. Like right now, it's almost become the reverse problem, to where we're having more of a problem getting original movies because the comic book movies are such bankable assets for Disney, or to a certain extent Warner Brothers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's you can probably trace that. It wouldn't be the only um, the only source or catalyst for it. But you look at the fact that Hollywood is really obsessed with rebooting and um, what's the other word? Reboot or sequels, reboots, or I don't know. But just taking an existing property and trying to cash in and make something new, regardless of how much it actually resembles the source material.
Right.
And so,
Adapting. Was that what you were
yeah,
thinking of, adapting it? Yeah.
that works. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but yes, that is probably a better word than what I was trying to think of. So you have that sort of mentality of like, this is a proven profitable property, so let's use that name and then just do something with it. And then I'll probably come back to this point before we're done, but in Marvel's universe, you have Kevin Feige, who is
Mm-hmm.
sort of masterminding the whole thing from a broad plan and timeline with all their phases and stuff. And then you just they're just pick all these directors. I know that Zack Snyder was heavily involved in the beginning when they started their universe with Man of Steel. But with all that, it is a bankable property, but particularly Batman, because Batman has been mega popular with demographics since 1989. I mean, some would argue even since 1966, but it was certainly a different Batman then. And really a different Batman 1989 too, but still.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it is interesting to me that these films like Batman and Superman don't surprise me as much that even whatever you think about their quality aren't still at least starting off well, or people are going to see them. But what does surprise me is things like Guardians of the Galaxy or Suicide Squad even performed pretty well. These like lower tier genre properties and stuff that I didn't even know. I didn't read enough comics to know of their existence when they were announced. And at least as far as Guardians goes, that's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, MCU film to date. So it's
I think we'd both probably put it in the top three, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm still trying to see how Black Panther shakes out, but for me personally, it's between Guardians 1 and Black Panther, or both they alternate in my top two. But yeah. So I mean, I'll go back to DC, I guess, right? So yeah, I didn't have a we don't want to inadvertently
Marvel fanboys at it again.
Yeah, here we go. I don't want to inadvertently raise the quality of this podcast by avoiding talking about DC. But the my background with the properties too actually goes all the way back because to hand-me-down action figures from my older brother, who is 6 years older than me, and so he was really into the Super Friends when he was young, and so he just passed his action figures down to me, and so I was playing with like Superman and Batman and Green Lantern and Aquaman and stuff like that before I really had an idea as to the real mythos of them all. And so when it came to, I would almost say film and television were kind of split tracks to me, because like after school or on Saturday mornings, I was definitely all about like X-Men and Spider-Man and those Fox cartoons from the 90s. And then, but then also there was Batman the Animated Series, which was like right in line with that. So pretty much there was all this variety on the Marvel side, and then there was Batman. For DC, because you had the Tim Burton films coming out around that time as well, or a little before that, and then and then those other movies happened. But so yeah, I mean, Batman has definitely seemed to be the focal point of their group, which is interesting to me because I don't know that he is organically the focal point of that group logically,
Right.
It's just like the most profitable one. So
yeah, in some ways,
vulnerable.
Right. In some ways, Batman's kind of the outlier in the DC universe to me, because he's the one non-superpowered character in a world of Superman, Wonder Woman, Darkseid, Green Lantern, all these different characters. So, well, I guess we'll get into that later, but to me, that's, I guess, a little bit of the issue for DC is trying to integrate Batman, who's maybe the central figure, at least as much as Superman, if not more, and he certainly has been more in terms of the way he's been represented on the screen. but trying to integrate the Nolan films, that was kind of their jumping off point, even though those weren't part of the DCEU, trying to integrate that with all these other characters who are almost basically just gods.
Yeah, and it, it makes sense to me. Before you said he didn't have any powers, I was about to say, well, maybe I'm not being totally unfair or totally fair to Batman because he shares a lot of personality traits, I think, with Wolverine over in Marvel, and he's also ridiculously popular in that universe as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
did you ever see? Did you ever see? Not hate to cut you off, but did you ever read? They did. Back when I was reading comics in, I guess, the 90s, this would have been probably mid 90s, they did a crossover between DC and Marvel. And I think this was, I can't remember if this was after there was an Age of Apocalypse story in the Marvel comics, kind of like what we saw on screen, or at least the title on screen for the X-Men movie. But this was something sort of different, and I can't remember if this thing with DC came about that time, but it was basically blending DC characters with Marvel characters. And so you had Superman and Captain America combined into one character, and you had Wolverine and Batman combined into one character called Dark Claw.
Interesting. I've seen the artwork from that, but I admit I've never read it. Going up to and my comic consumption is still pretty low. I'm mostly into the film and television side of things. I think really the only real exposure I had to the to comics in general on a regular basis was reading like the Death and Return of Superman story arc because that was really popular. But yeah, I confess, I'm a poser. I don't have any respect for the source material because I haven't read it.
Right. Okay. So I guess kind of really to get into more the meat of the discussion here, what would you say is kind of, how would you grade the current state of the DC universe? And well, let me give you mine first. Let me give you mine first, and then you can jump off from there. So
sure.
I'll tell you kind of how I would grade the current state of the DC universe and kind of what I see as the problems of where it's gone wrong. So compared to Marvel, like you said, I mean, to a certain extent, I'm glad that we're getting these films, which 20 years ago would have seemed unthinkable. But seeing how well Marvel has done it, I've been disappointed by how DC has failed in a lot of ways by comparison. And yeah. I think one of the biggest things for me, you were talking about Kevin Feige, and I can't remember at what point has he been the guy from the beginning since they made Iron Man?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think most people who've been in the business world know that organizations, the quality of an organization and how well it tends to run just goes from top down. Yeah. And so if you have a good owner or a good general manager or whatever, they're going to hire good people, and then those people are going to hire good people, and so on. And so I think that's the big advantage that Marvel has had, is having good, steady, consistent leadership at the top, and then it's just filtered down from there. Whereas with Warner Brothers and that DC connection, I couldn't even tell you. I think they recently put someone new in charge, but I mean, I couldn't tell you who's been running that to this point. And
yeah,
and so clearly, but if regardless of whether or not it's been one person or multiple people, it hasn't gone nearly as well as Marvel's done it. And I think that's a big point there. That's probably the single biggest point that I would make. Although the second one that I would make was where they went wrong with this was just not letting each character, each franchise be what they are. it feels like they looked at the Nolan Batman trilogy and said, "Oh, people enjoyed this because it's dark and realistic. We have to almost take this like a filter and use it over every other character and franchise that we put out." And who knows, maybe Zack Snyder would have done that anyway with Man of Steel, but it really felt like, and especially with Christopher Nolan being a producer on Man of Steel, that they decided that they were going to just take that sort of filter and then use it across all the other characters, and as opposed to just letting them be what they are and building a good franchise or a good trilogy from that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. To speak to those points and add one of my own. One of the first things I thought of was Kevin Feige. I mean, because he's not doing everything by himself, but he is a singular focal point by which everyone else is rallied behind his vision of how to execute these films. And also, like, they, in that vision, I mean, there was a time, forgive me, I ate some bad dinner. Anyways, there was a time, I want to say around Ant-Man or around Guardians of the Galaxy or so, in that era, that people, at least like the general consensus I was reading on the internet, it's like, well, any day now Marvel's gonna release a stinker, like you can't do it. And I remember Edgar Wright was attached to Ant-Man before, man, I can't remember the director's name, but he did Bring It On, the cheerleading movie, before they swapped out. And like, even then people were like, oh, see, when you change directors, the movie's in trouble. But he was unwilling to compromise on his vision of what the film should be. And I think he's proven right in that. And I think they're really doing something phenomenal over there, because I think he's writing Infinity War, we'll see. Like, we'll see how this all ends up. But up to now, I think that he has done quite possibly the best possible job with the limited access to the universe that he has to use. Yeah. So, which has, forced him to make modifications to some of the storylines. And also the approach, and this leads into my second point. One of the reasons I think DC fails is because they're reactionary. They're not.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not proactive. So they saw all the money that Avengers made, and instead of learning the lesson that the reason the Avengers made so much money is because you spent time with almost all of those individual characters beforehand, so you didn't have to have a lot of origin story things happening in the actual team up film. You had that, and they just see the dollar signs. I'm putting so many words in their mouth right now, but this is just what it looks like. They see all the dollar signs. They're like, oh, well, we have a better team than they have because we've got Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. So let's just make our movie. And then, like, they made Man of Steel. It had some negative feedback. And then they answered that, and they had some criticisms about how Man of Steel went. And then they reacted to that in their next film by compensating for, like, trying to explain away their criticisms. Only to while they answered some of those things, they also created more problems about the overall tone. And then they've had to recalibrate all over again with Justice League and make it like this Joss Whedon light, which, I mean, Joss Whedon's actually a part of it. So, I mean, and I try not to be too hard on Justice League because that was not really the filmmaker's fault. I think that was the studio's fault for the most part.
Right.
But so, like, they are not operating like a team who is on offense. They are kind of like, Jared, I was not anticipating making so many Marvel analogies in our DC episode. Sorry. It's like my favorite scene in the Avengers. When Banner shows up and he turns into the Hulk for the first time in front of everybody and punches that giant worm thing. Like, up until that point, they were playing like containment, like they were playing survival, with the city. And then when he showed up, I was talking to one of my friends about the scene. It's like it was like a physical manifestation of a coach's halftime speech at in a sports drama. And like all of a sudden, every character, when they were unified, they went on the offensive. And like it's they've never really had that unification point, and it all just falls so disingenuous when they try to manufacture it. So yeah, they're reactionary. And then lastly, I would say is that they don't have the appropriate respect, like you said, for the source material.
Yeah, to let it be what it
Because
is. Yeah.
yeah, because I honestly and truthfully believe, for all the positive things I'll say about Marvel and how all day long I will say that the MCU is better than the DCEU as far as what they've done right now. Strip away all the films, I still think that DC actually has better heroes and historically has told better stories. But they're not translating them well at all. Like, I mean, if you'd asked me when I was a kid if I wanted to see a Batman or a Superman movie or an Iron Man or a Captain America movie, I'd be like,
Right.
hello, Batman, Superman, yeah. If you had told me then they were going to make a Justice League movie, I'd have been pumped up, about all that. And so, they've just mismanaged it so much. And the truth of the matter is that, I think what's helpful is that Marvel has a studio,
Yeah.
like that's tied to their overall brand, I guess, So like they feel ownership over that brand. So they want to see it done right. And of course everybody's about making money, but I don't think the DC execs or the Warner Brothers execs would care or not if the film was any good, as long as it was profitable.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, a couple of things you mentioned. I was just laughing the point about DC being reactionary, because that was one of the biggest things that I was going to bring up. And to me, there's no better way to see that than through the Superman character, who in every movie, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Justice League, Superman is just a reaction to the previous movie's Superman. And
Yeah.
so, like you said, like it started out with Man of Steel, and I actually probably like Man of Steel a lot better than most people did. Superman, in some ways, might be my favorite character if done right, and I liked a more realistic take on him. One thing you and I talked about that, of course, we both just absolutely hated and thought was one of the biggest problems with the film was, there again, the fact that they can't just let something be what it is and respect the source material, is how they basically just bastardized Clark's relationship with his parents. Like, rather than, Clark and Superman become who they are because he gets raised by good, salt of the earth parents.
Yeah.
And they decided, whoever decided, probably not DC, it was, I'm sure, either Snyder or the studio or some combination of the two. They decided, we don't really have superheroes that became who they are because they had good parents. It's usually, and this is just true of, it's usually just true of characters in general. It's because of some tragic relationship with their parents. So Batman's parents died. Peter Parker, not necessarily with his parents, they were kind of out of the picture, but with his Uncle Ben. Iron Man, we saw his relationship with his parents and what happened in Civil War. The list just goes on and on. So it's kind of like they looked at that and said, it's kind of like they were trying to analyze why Superman is harder to relate to. And I think he is harder to relate to as a character. But it's like they looked at that and said, well, maybe it's because of the parents. Maybe we'll just do a complete 180 with that and make his parents these just kind of jerks in some ways. I mean, they're protective of him to a fault, to say the least, to where they're okay with just him letting people die if it doesn't expose him. So
yeah.
So that was one of the biggest problems with the movie. But some of the critiques of the movie I didn't really agree with. The destruction in Metropolis was one that a lot of people jumped on and made parallels to 9/11, saying that it was, overkill and seeing the buildings fall and things like that. But to me, I mean, that's just kind of what would happen if you had Superman and Zod in a fight, like that's what would happen. And people also said, well, he should have taken the fight somewhere else. This should have been a fight on the moon or something like that. But basically, they're equal, or two guys of equal strength.
Yeah.
And so if someone's in your house, if someone comes into your house and wants to have a fight with you, it's going to be hard for you to get them out of your house. Like, you may just have to have the fight right there,
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of things. Well, I'll talk about the Zod thing first. I was one of those people. I didn't care for the wanton destruction of the city either. The reason why I had the problem with that is that Superman didn't seem to be bothered by it. He was more bothered by the fact that he had to kill Zod to save 4 people with no regard to the thousands of people who died instead. And so that, that bugs me a little bit, but the reality of it happening doesn't bother me as much over time the more I think about it, because you're kind of looking at a year one Superman. Like, I mean, he hasn't, as far as what the film is showing us, is that he hasn't engaged in a lot of action. And while Zod is adapting to being super, being on Earth in the moment, he's also a general. So he's a military tactician and soldier. So, and Clark is a farm boy. Who doesn't have very strict parents, apparently, because they waffle around like nobody's business. I have a real problem with the Kents. That's probably like my least favorite part of the entire film is what they did with the Kents, and also Jor-El. Like I thought the character of the fathers were on the wrong actors. Like, it is because of his Kryptonian heritage that Superman is so powerful when he arrives to Earth, but it's the Kents that make him Superman instead of Zod. And so no, like I was so frustrated, and part of this is because I'm an adoptive father as well, and so like I mean, I understand just as a parent the notion of not wanting your child to get hurt or suffer, I should say, because I mean Clark's not going to get hurt. I mean, that's not really the thing they're worried about, but the suffering, the public, the school bus scene, like, doesn't make any sense. Like, he rescues his entire class. Parents come over and are trying to give him credit. Like, they're trying to thank him for saving their life. And his dad is like, we can't ever, he's like Elsa's parents from Frozen, conceal, don't feel, don't let them know, and like, don't, he's like, they can't find out because they'll do something horrible. Like, meanwhile, all those people are showing their gratitude. Like, they're not doing that because he's doing something heroic. And it's so stupid to me. His "should I have let them die? I don't know, maybe" response.
That's the worst. That's the worst line in the movie.
And they put it in the trailer, man. In the trailer, I was like, "What?" Like, and the thing is that Clark's parents, the Kents, they're Kansas farm people, and like, Jared, you and I both have grown up in rural areas, and
not even in the Midwest. And Midwesterners are far nicer than even, I mean, rural people in general tend to be nice, but Midwesterners are the single nicest group of people, just, pretty much you can find geographically in the U.S.
Well, number one, I would say, if you're going to paint with a broad brush about people's stereotypical characters, rural farmers are one, value life, place a high value on life, or at least human life. And two, they're resolute in their convictions. Like, that kind of manual labor and hard work to maintain your livelihood by working the land. I've never met a flimsy, wishy-washy farmer in my life. And that's just shows that Zack Snyder doesn't know farm people. But like, the reason that bugs me so much is that at the 10 minutes later, there's another flashback where the kids are trying to beat him up, and he's just trying to withstand, trying to withhold punching the kids back because he'll kill him. And then Jonathan Kent's like, well, son, one day you can grow up and have to choose who you're going to be. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
No, that is not the message a father gives his son. Like a father might give that message to an adult son, but at that
Hmm.
point he should have been pouring his whole life leading up to that, being like, you need to be making the right choice in these situations, and let me demonstrate for you to the best of my ability what that right choice is.
Yeah.
Um, and since Jor-El had never met a human being before in his life, he had no attachment to them.
Hmm.
So he doesn't need to be the one who tells him you can save them all
Right.
and all this other stuff. Like he was more interested in preserving his own planet. Now he wasn't evil, so he didn't go along with Zod. He wouldn't have gone along with Zod's plan to repopulate Earth, but he's just he is the moral compass for Superman, and I think that's wrong because
Yeah.
because it doesn't logically make sense that the moral compass for Superman is someone that you would spend all of maybe a day and a half with versus another set of parents who you spend your whole life with,
Yeah.
your cognizant life, and then also his mom, like the whole "be their hero" or "be nothing." You
Yeah.
don't know them. I'm like, yeah, okay, bitter Martha is stupid. Like
Yeah.
that was not a good choice either. And like, and I get it from the point of like they're tired of seeing their son suffer, and they don't want their son to have bad things happen to him. But
Yeah.
like, small town, parents and stuff, I mean, I know again, I'm being generic or stereotypical here, but like, those kinds of people will more often than not take that moment to teach you what the right step is rather than saying, well, I mean, you
Hmm.
could let him die.
I
It's up to
wonder
you.
how much. I wonder how much Snyder. How much fault was from Snyder, like putting too much on the Christ parallel here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he very intentionally did. I think Superman in the film was 33.
Yeah, that's true.
Superman in the film was a fisherman for a while,
Yeah.
and
And we have
so
no biblical evidence of Joseph being an influence on Jesus's life.
yeah. So I mean, I just wonder. I just wonder how much of that was him just trying to really go hard with that parallel.
Maybe so. I think he failed though.
Yeah.
If that's what he was
Well,
doing.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think you said it well there again when we were just kind of having a side conversation about this. Like again, going back to Marvel here, but Marvel has done Superman better than DC has done Superman in Captain
Yes.
America.
Absolutely. Chris Evans is the greater Superman.
Right, right, and it is interesting, going back to that Marvel DC crossover where those two characters were the two that blended together, and I can't remember. Like I said, when it was Batman and Wolverine, it was Dark Claw. Dark Claw was the mashup of those two. I can't remember what the Superman Captain America one was, but it is kind of interesting that those two characters paralleled, and then ultimately Marvel's kind of done a better job with their version of him, even though Chris Evans or Captain America is one of the least superpowered characters, compared to Thor, or even though Iron Man doesn't have superpowers, his suit essentially gives him superpowers. The Hulk, all these other characters.
His
So
name was Captain Krypton, by the way, I think. I
was
just
it?
looked it up. I looked it up. I mean,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
did it hastily, so we'll see. But you know
Yeah.
what though, just to echo that off of Captain America and how they did that so well, so there's a scene in Captain America: The First Avenger where he's talking to the scientist who gave him the formula, and he says, the formula is not what makes you a hero. The
Hmm.
formula only amplifies who you already are.
Yeah.
And like so, it was the yellow sun that amplified Superman, but like it was who he was inside is what made him who he was,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
don't explore that.
Right. Yeah. And just going back to Man of Steel, back to the part about the destruction in Metropolis. The reason I was more forgiving of that was the fact that when Zod and his forces brought in the World Engine and it starts ripping the place up, in my mind, I assumed that they basically just evacuated the city, and I don't remember if that's supported by the scenes we see of Superman and Zod flying through buildings, or if we actually see characters still trapped in those buildings or whatever. That was always my rationalization for it. It's in an area where it's probably going to be, skyscrapers and a lot of office buildings anyway, not a lot of residential. And then on top of that, they probably got the heck out of Dodge once all that started happening. So that was part of the reason that I was more forgiving of that part.
Well, you see, I mean, you just to counterpoint that real quick, like that you do see them running through the streets as the buildings are falling, so they didn't get very far.
True.
And then additionally, now I know this goes back to them being reactionary, but in the opening scene of Batman v Superman, like Bruce Wayne witnesses one of his buildings go down, and he has just gotten off the phone with one of his employees, and that was still a full building, like when it went down. So I mean, obviously, I'm certainly not suggesting that you're claiming that there was this mass evacuation like Sokovia or something like that, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was some, because at that end scene where it's just dust on the ground, like there's not anybody around at all.
Yeah, and that's one of the scenes that kind of cracked me up. That was, I guess, maybe the first part where I was like, wow, that's really over the top, where it's just like you hear the expression in war that they're going to bomb something and turn it into a parking lot. They literally turned something into a parking lot. It's just this giant circle of rubble with some destroyed buildings in the background. So that was the first part where I was like, holy crap, they really did destroy this city. Like what is actually left of this here?
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, I tried to be more forgiving of that, because I did appreciate the realistic take on Superman in some ways, but the main thing was the parents, to a certain extent, the destruction. I'm trying to think.
I thought they started with some real promise.
Yeah.
I like the notion of Clark having to deal with the fact that he can hear everything, and it's overwhelming to him. And I also like the notion that he has all this power, but he will not allow, he's struggling to allow himself to react to unjust situations, because his actions of fighting back will, have really dire consequences. So, I felt like those things could have been explored a little more, but
yeah. Well, I think when I left that movie, though, I felt like, okay, they didn't get everything perfect, and they screwed up the parents' backstory. But in sequels, the parents, which this is pretty funny actually in hindsight, but I was thinking like they'll fix a lot of this, or it's close enough that they can course correct it. And one of my thoughts was like with the part about the Kents, like this is important for an origin story. This will fade into the background in sequels, and then Batman v Superman gave us our Martha moment. So,
Jared.
So for all the hope that I had after Man of Steel of like, yeah, this wasn't perfect. This wasn't perfect, but I'd maybe give it like 3 out of 5 stars or something like that. You've got something to build on here. They can take the good parts of it, carry those forward, let the other stuff kind of fade away. And in reality, they sort of did the exact opposite.
Yeah, I mean, that climactic moment felt like it was written with the creativity of a middle schooler. I mean, it just, oh man, it was bad. Like, I mean, just why would a man say his mother's first name when, like,
yeah, that's always been my entire point. Yeah.
It's totally unnatural and illogical. And like, I know bringing logic into a superhero movie, we had that argument, but it is like the hanging point of the film. Like, it's what ends the fight. And like, it's just so, oh gosh. Because even then, like, I can get behind Batman and Superman fighting because they've been manipulated by Luthor. But some people should say, well, Batman should be smarter than that. But I mean, you got to have a plot or else nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
but yeah, like having that be and the actual action leading up to that point I thought was good. Yeah, I really enjoyed the animated film of The Dark Knight Returns, which is the inspiration for the fight portion of Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
And that was a really well told story. And just an aside, real quick, another massive issue I have with DC as a whole is that they have cherry picked some of their best content from their best stories, and now they can't tell a proper version of that story.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, Batman v Superman was a mashup of the, like you said, the graphic novel.
Returns.
Yeah, the graphic novel / cartoon. It was a mashup of the death of Superman.
Yep.
And like probably two other things mixed in.
Yeah, I was excited. I mean, I was excited when that trailer came out until I saw Doomsday, and I knew what they were going to do.
The Ninja Turtle,
the cave troll from.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Ring.
Yeah.
Super Zod, like Super Shredder.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. At first, when I first saw him, I'm like, man, he looks like because Ninja Turtles had come out about the same time, and then I'd forgotten the cave troll comparison, because that's actually better. That actually is more like what he actually said.
Yeah, like I mean, I didn't mind their origin story for Doomsday either. But I felt like that could have been served as a better villain for Justice League than Steppenwolf, who I didn't even, you know what I mean? But
I'd never heard of Steppenwolf before. I'd followed DC enough to know, of course, all the main superheroes and most of their individual rogues gallery of villains, but I still to this day have not bothered to look up to see where Steppenwolf actually came from.
Yeah, well, I mean, he is like the first lieutenant for Darkseid. So, I mean, I think, they are, I had to look that up to find out, but like I think he pretty much just existed because initially they announced 2 Justice League movies.
Yeah.
And the part 1 and part 2, and I'm pretty sure the original cut or the original intention was to set up the arrival of Darkseid in the second one, and so that's why they would have gone with him. But like,
did they backtrack off that?
I don't think they're doing another Justice League now because it performed so poorly. I mean, don't hold me to that, but I think they might have pulled it off the calendar at least.
Right. Yeah. So. I know they've been talking about Man of Steel 2, Wonder Woman 2, Suicide Squad 2, but I hadn't seen anything about Justice League, and I knew, like you said, that originally it was supposed to be a 2-parter where Darkseid showed up in the second one. So I just haven't, again, after seeing parts of Justice League, I haven't actually even seen the whole movie. It's the one DC movie I haven't seen all the way through, but I felt like
I started it twice and I fell asleep twice. And I want to let you know that I fell asleep because I couldn't get into it, but I do want to let you know, I recognize that I've been yawning a little bit. It's just because I forgot to drink any caffeine before we started. Your conversation is very engaging. It's just these kids wear me out. So
it's fun. Yeah. So I hadn't seen, I don't know. I would think, it made, under 700 million at the box office, which for
whatever it made, Black Panther did it in 4 days. I just know that.
Right. Yeah, which is insane. You think about all the reshoots, having 2 different directors, and it financially was maybe not a disaster for Warner Brothers compared to some of the other things that have happened in Hollywood lately, the financial disasters, but it was really bad, and there's nothing in there that says you should do a sequel or that you're going to make any better money on a sequel.
I don't think so. Justice League reminded me of like a really bad Star Wars movie. In that the story itself, I don't know if I could sit through the whole thing, but there are a collection of really fun scenes in there, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's not all bad. The reactionary again, but
did I tell you the how I think it was Half in the Bag, Red Letter Media, their description of it?
No.
Did I tell you that one? Yeah. I thought this was the best analysis of it in one sentence, mainly because of the visuals, because I don't understand why the DC movies CGI can look as bad as it looks sometimes. But
And why would they introduce Aquaman to a final battle scene where there's no water anywhere?
yeah,
Anyway,
that's kind of weird.
yeah.
But their Red Letter Media half in the bags analysis was Justice League is the best movie that 1996 never made.
Yeah, I can see that because I think about what our expectations were in that decade. You know, you had Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, and if you go back to those films, well, I mean, you probably won't want to go back to Batman and Robin for sure,
Right.
but even Batman Forever had its moments, you know. But
yeah, I actually liked Batman Forever. Okay.
yeah, I mean it's my second favorite out of that era of Batman, behind the original Burton one. But yeah, man, that's a great analysis for sure.
Yeah. So then, I guess just to kind of tying Justice League in. So from if Superman is our connecting thread here through all this. So in Batman v Superman, then they kind of doubled down on him being unsure about what his role was in saving people, and he has the courtroom scene where the bomb goes off, and he has this introspective look at himself about, well, did I know that the bomb was there and I let it go off? So they made all those problems worse. They tried to address the fact, I guess, to make Batman a more sympathetic character. They tried to address fans' anger about the whole destruction of Metropolis and letting so many people die, that element of it. Yeah. But with Superman, they really just kind of compounded the problems. And then you come back to, although I will say, okay, this is the one thing that I will say for Batman v Superman. My initial reaction when they were having the giant celebration, or not celebration, but they were really paying their respects to him with a military funeral. It was almost like a national funeral type thing for him at the end. And my initial reaction was, that's ridiculous. They've spent the whole time hating this guy. They wouldn't just do a 180 and then suddenly be giving him all these honors. And then somebody said that's the most accurate thing in the movie. That is the most true to life thing in the movie, because every celebrity within society, we will spend years or decades bashing them. And then as soon as they die, then it's like this embargo, or whatever you want to call it, on saying anything bad about them. It's like everyone then suddenly everyone suddenly remembers them much better than what they were.
That's so true. Absolutely.
So I did kind of laugh to him. Yeah. So I did kind of laugh at that. Like, after reflecting on that a little bit more, I was like, yeah, that's actually right. That's probably exactly what would happen in the real world. Like, if Donald Trump,
Facebook posts, I've always loved Superman.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, if Donald Trump died tomorrow, you'd probably have tons and tons of people that were, vehemently against him, that suddenly was like, well, let's remember him for the good things. And I don't know, he might be the one guy. He might be the one guy that would be the exception too. But true. It really does. That resonated with me. But anyway, so if that's the one takeaway that I can make from that movie, that's a pretty sad commentary on that movie. Although the other thing, like, the best part about that movie, the best part about Batman v Superman for me was Wonder Woman.
Yeah, they certainly, they didn't give her a lot to do, which I think was helpful. So they didn't ruin her yet,
right,
for her movie. And I think, just honestly, just making her a badass in the fight.
And she looked like she was having fun. She looked like she was having fun at times.
Never looked intimidated in the fight either. You know, and there's a line that she has. What did they say? They said something like, "This thing is not of this world," and she's like, "I've fought things not of this world before."
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, I can get behind that.
Right. So, yeah, and she's kind of been. I just saw Wonder Woman for the first time over the weekend to kind of catch up on most of the DC stuff for this talk, apart from Justice League, which, like I said, I've seen a lot of individual scenes from Justice League, and considering the fact that it went through tons and tons of reshoots, it had 2 different directors, they chopped off who knows how much off the final product. I feel like I might as you're just as well served kind of watching individual scenes probably as trying to watch the entire movie. You're probably not going to get much more of a cohesive vision watching the full movie than you are just watching individual scenes.
I don't think there's any more clarity for sitting through the whole thing. I mean, there's a few bit parts. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Jason Momoa's Aquaman.
Yeah.
I think his film might be all right too. I mean, we'll see.
All the characters worked for me.
Yeah, I didn't really love the Flash. I thought I was going to.
Yeah.
But because he's better in the trailers than he is in the film. Like, he's just such a dork.
Yeah.
And and I also, I mean, I think I have a little hidden bias because I was pretty upset when they announced they wouldn't be casting Grant Gustin for it, and he's such a great Flash on the TV series. And Ezra Miller, I mean, no disrespect to him. I mean, I think he did the best with what he was given to work with. But there was very much sorry to do Marvel again, but it's very much a Tom Holland Spider-Man addition to the team. Now, I think my favorite thing, but it might be a little too late, was when they finally normalized Superman to be like who he probably should have been all along.
Right.
Yeah, a little bit of dry wit. He was sincere. He was genuine without being a drag. And so there were moments of that, that I thought was well. So he and Flash, I think, worked well off of each other. Cyborg was just kind of irrelevant to me. I mean,
yeah,
he was just kind of there. And I think Batman was a little better. I will say I really enjoyed the scenes between Batman and Alfred. I think Affleck and Irons have good chemistry together there. And I wouldn't mind seeing more of that. That went pretty well.
Yeah. The Superman thing, like I said, I agree with you. I think it seemed like they probably finally on the 3rd try kind of got Superman right. But then again, at the same time, after seeing them basically double down on his brooding in Batman v Superman, then to have him, which, I mean, I guess you could say that part of it comes from his death and resurrection, but I think it was just they went all in with kind of those classic Superman lines, and when he shows up at the end to fight Steppenwolf, and you hear him off screen, and he's like, "I believe in truth, but I also believe in justice." It was just like it was like a little too over the top, on the nose for me. It was like they went back and gave him a. Well, I was thinking like they went back and gave him like made Cavill watch just hours and hours of Christopher Reeve on loop, and said, just do exactly this. We've got to get you back to
I'll defend Reeve. I thought Reeve was fantastic, but he was also like his portrayal worked well for the time that he was in.
Yeah, and I'm not criticizing Reeve. I'm just saying, like, I think they, how when you see an actor take on a role that's been played before, and there's a fine line between like kind of doing their own thing or going too far with it, or just having it be like they're basically doing that previous actor's version of that character. And so
Jared Leto comes to mind.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Another DC character. So for me, it was kind of like almost just too on the nose. Like they just tried to force him into being exactly what Reeve was in the 80s. And as much as I would have kind of liked that if we'd started out with that, just to sort of like all of a sudden have him get to that point at the end of now the 3rd movie we've seen him in.
Right.
That was kind of my issue with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I certainly agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I wish they'd done that earlier. But it's and the moments they chose. If you just watch Justice League in a vacuum, I think they're I think some of those scenes where he's reminiscent of Reeve is well executed, but I mean, in the overall story of what they're doing, like it just seemed like they don't have a plan,
Yeah.
and they're just really making quick decisions. There's no long-term investment in their story planning, from what it looks like, and you know we're reaping the consequences of that as the movie going public. You know.
Yeah. What I think we'd probably both agree that the Wonder Woman movie by far has been the best of this set of DCEU movies, right? Out of Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League, Wonder Woman, and Suicide Squad. Out of those five, like Wonder Woman is by far the best out
close.
of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was skeptical of that. Like, even though I really liked her character, even though I thought her character was the best thing in Batman v Superman, I was skeptical that they could actually translate that out over an entire film. And then even when the reviews started coming in, I was still kind of skeptical about it in the same way that I was a little bit worried about Black Panther. What, you know, was it going to be a case of people wanting to like this movie so much,
so like SJW hype?
Yeah, exactly. SJW, like, I'm going to tell you how much I love this movie in order to show you how I am not sexist or how I am not racist.
Right.
And so I was relieved that they actually turned out to be really, really good. But yeah, I mean, that's like the one thing that they've actually gotten right is Wonder Woman.
And also look at the way her mother was protective of her and didn't want her to suffer either. And look at the way they dealt with that. Like, I mean,
right.
That I thought was done very, very well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And also, Chris Pine, I thought was an excellent, like they had great chemistry together. And, and I really, really liked his, I don't know how to describe it, but this moment where he just loses patience with her and tries to convince her that, like, no, like, men are evil. Like, you know, we don't not all of us want to be, but you know, we are. Like, there's not always, you know, our evil decisions are not because of some greater threat. Of course, the greater threat is still out there and exists, but mankind also, you know, needs to take responsibility for their actions. And so for her to take that in and process that and still choose to love and defend mankind despite their flaws, I thought was a really powerful message that I was not expecting from DC film.
Yeah. Now I thought it was well done, and I felt like there were some different hurdles there that they could have very easily kind of derailed that movie. I mean, just down to the fact that it's essentially her origin story, but I mean, most characters don't have origin stories that start decades earlier. I mean, Captain America does, but Captain America is not coming from an island where he's cut off from the rest of the world, and so there's this sort of naivete to Wonder Woman's character, and that could have very easily been annoying, or it could have very easily like gotten annoying. But yeah, I thought they did do a good job of that, and partnering her with Chris Pine's character, Steve Trevorrow. Yeah, Steve Trevor. Trevor. Okay, I overcomplicated that.
Trevorrow is the Jurassic World director.
Oh yeah, that's right.
His name's Colin.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I felt like, yeah, they actually played that out really well. So I guess maybe to kind of wrap a little bit of this up, considering where we are with the DCEU at the moment, can it be fixed? And if so, how much, I guess, then? You know, what do you kind of see going forward for this? I mean, because I'll let you go, and then I'll give you my take.
Fixed is a funny word. I don't think it'll ever be at the level that Marvel is, and we just have to come to terms with that. But I still think the best version of itself is still out there, and that can be achieved. I think that might be like a too little too late approach, but I think It's just addressing those criticisms that we made, like respecting the source material, like building a connection with an individual character prior to introducing them as a part of something greater. Like, I feel like they have addressed the character issues of Superman. So if they do a Man of Steel 2, I'd be interested to see what his character is like in that film. I could be optimistic about that, maybe. I would also really like to see a standalone Batman film that has no influence. I know we've done Batman to death, but the scene in Batman v Superman where he's rescuing Martha, and he's taking out all those mercenaries or goons or whatever in that warehouse.
That was cool.
Really made me want them to do a film adaptation of the video game Arkham Asylum.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, it felt like going back and playing Arkham Asylum.
And I don't think that's a bad idea because it's a great story. You know, the other two stories that I'd really want to see them do, they've already screwed up because they've done half of them. And
Yeah.
I think Arkham Asylum could be a really fun way to do that because you could almost have like a, I don't want to say a horror element to it, but there's sort of like, you know, what's behind this corner kind of thing. And, you know, the sort of the labyrinth nature of the game. I don't know. I think it could be good. And the game's been out for like, what, 10 years or more now. So,
yeah,
you know, that's enough of a shelf life. I mean, we've had 2 Spider-Man reboots in that amount of time, probably. So,
right.
We can do that with Batman.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, just you talking about the Spider-Man reboot is when Marvel took over, when they actually got the rights to Spider-Man back, even though I thought Andrew Garfield actually did a pretty good job.
I don't like him. He's too attractive to be Peter Parker.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the criticisms.
I thought he was a great Spider-Man. I think he and Tobey Maguire had opposite problems. I thought Tobey was a good Parker and a bad Spider-Man, and then Garfield was a bad Parker and a good Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they I think that was kind of the problem for each one of them. But but Marvel recast him, even if he had been borderline perfect for it. Marvel was always going to recast him because there's just something to kind of having a fresh start, even though the problem may not have been the actor. And so I guess that's kind of my question for the DCEU is it's they're going to go forward with it. It's kind of in this no man's land where it's doing well enough that they can't just scrap it, but it's probably too screwed up at this point to ever really get anywhere on par with Marvel with what they've got.
That's where they need a figurehead because Kevin Feige, I think, would pull the plug on their current storyline. And they honestly, they have a good opportunity to do it because there is one story arc left called Flashpoint, Flash's story, which I think is going to be the plot of the Flash film. So I'm sure it'll be done terribly, but we'll see. And that could serve as a reset button for the overall narrative because the way the Flash has messed with time in the past, it changes hero-villain alliances. It resets just the attitude of people's character. So they could really do whatever they wanted if they really wanted Flash to mess with time.
I wouldn't be opposed to that because I like going back to the actors again. I generally like their castings. Like I really like Cavill as Superman, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I'm okay with Ben Affleck as Batman. I think I appreciate more what they've done with him in terms of just the way they've represented him on screen, like you said, with that fight scene in Batman v Superman, kind of more than his portrayal itself. His portrayal has been fine, but I think coming off of the Nolan Batman films, I've just got like a little bit of Batman fatigue, So
that's fair.
So I like what they've done, and I hate to see it. I would hate to see it just scrapped, even though I'm not really that worried about it because I don't think they're going to do that because I like the actors, I like the castings, but at the same time, I mean, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's to somehow use the Flash, the Flash's Flashpoint storyline to kind of reset some of these stories. I don't know if they've got the smarts or the guts to do that, and then kind of come back with new trilogies or something. But
Yeah,
maybe
well,
that.
they don't have the figurehead who is casting that long-term vision. So
Right.
I feel like it's going to be just another wasted plot point unless they were to bring somebody in and being like, this is where we're going with all these stories. I
Right.
would almost say, like, just destroy the universe itself and have them as a collection of individual films,
Hmm.
or bring somebody in to give them a long-term narrative if they're going to do a shared universe, because it's just
Yeah.
there is potential there. And I say that, somebody, I grew up loving those stories and loving those characters. And I share, your love for Superman. Like, I think he's an excellent character, and I think he's such a great example when he's done right. Um and so I want it to succeed, because I love the properties. But it's frustrating to see how this stuff gets executed and then just makes its way for public consumption, and nobody looks at it and it's like, huh?
Yeah. Well, you bring up
Martha, really? Yeah.
you bring up an interesting point about the cinematic universes, and actually just read an article yesterday talking about how Justice League was great because it killed cinematic universes apart from Marvel's cinematic universe, and that's not really true. It's kind of but it's kind of a combination of this sort of 1-2 punch between Justice League, and I don't know how familiar you were with the Mummy, Tom Cruise's
Yeah.
The Mummy, which
It
was
killed
going.
the monster universe. Yeah.
Yeah, it was going to be the first film of the monster universe from what? Do you remember what company it was? I'm
Universal.
Universal. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Universal was going to have, I guess the Wolfman and Frankenstein, maybe the Creature from the Black Lagoon, all these different ones, and then that one bombed so much that it killed theirs, and then
Right.
I guess potentially Justice League has killed theirs too.
Also, I've heard people say that about Batman and Robin. Without Batman and Robin killing the Batman franchise, we might not have ever gotten Nolan's trilogy.
Yeah, that's
So
true. That's
there's
a
a
good point.
silver line. There's a silver lining to be had, I suppose.
Yeah. So maybe 10, 15 years down the road, we get a better, more cohesive DCEU, and we can look back and say, well, if we hadn't gotten Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, this would have never happened.
I don't know, dude. I know it's just because I'm getting older and it's, getting late where I'm at and everything. But the notion of, like, could you imagine if they rebooted Lost and
They
be like, all
will.
right, get ready to reinvest emotionally in this drag all over again? I'm like, nah, I'm gonna take a pass this time.
I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could do it. Yeah, but they will. I mean, even Damon Lindelof has said they'll reboot Lost at some point.
Well, nothing is safe anymore. I mean, and sometimes, I find that I learned that I'm not as attached to some franchises as I thought I was. The Star Wars universe does not speak to me like it does to a lot of people. I still enjoy the films, but I don't have a lot of criticisms for these new saga films. And then what was the other one? Oh, I'm glad I wasn't on that reverse redaction with you, because Ghostbusters didn't offend me that much. Like, I don't know. And it was a learning experience for me, because, like, when I see these things get announced,
yeah,
I'm like, oh, I'm not the one, going out and saying all those hateful things about it, but I'm like,
right.
why do you have to do this? And so the only one I can remember really that they rebooted was when Jaden Smith did The Karate Kid, and that one I hated just because it was such a doable film without having that name attached to it.
Right.
They don't learn karate, first of all, and it's the name's in the title. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's not like I'm some martial arts expert because I've studied the moves. They say in the film, "I'm going to teach you kung fu."
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I know where you're coming from on that. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we'll see what we get. We'll have to talk Lost at some point.
Yeah,
but that one would be a tough one to jump back into. I've actually seen ABC's been running promos for this series called The Crossing.
I saw Lost's Facebook page share that promo, or just earlier today.
Yeah. And so I don't know, obviously ABC, I'm sure will try to use, for better or for worse, Lost comparisons and maybe hope that, it's going to get more people than it's going to push away. But
well, I think ultimately to solve that problem too, Jared, is that the reboot trend is just going to have to run its course. And I think the superhero trend is probably going to have to run its course for them to. I mean, I'm not saying it won't come back. It'll definitely come back, and I don't know if the reboot trend will ever really die, because
well, that's my question. Like, is it a trend, or is this just the future? The farther we go with movies costing hundreds of millions of dollars to make, in some cases, when you've got bankable properties that people continue to go see, unless it's just really terrible. And now we've gotten to a point where about 80% of what's being put out there is either an adaptation of an existing property, like a book or graphic novel or whatever,
right,
or a sequel or a reboot. So 20%, and that number just keeps the percentage of original content just keeps decreasing. So I can't think of a good reason why that's going to slow down, because it all comes down to money and like having an existing audience that you can count on to at least make some of your money back.
People are just going to have reboot fatigue. I mean, and just not go see it. And since they switch from IP to IP, like, I mean, I don't know that they'll ever universally determine that, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess our main takeaway for this is that the DCEU just kind of is what it is. We're kind of mildly hopeful that we can get some solid standalone films out of it going forward, but beyond that, it's probably never going to work as a cinematic universe or get anywhere close to challenging the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's never going to overtake the MCU, and if it ever does, it's only going to be because Marvel has decided to stop.
Right.
And honestly, the Marvel properties, the Star Wars properties, all those things that Disney have acquired, including Fox now, they're profiting so much. Like, they're only going to stop if they decide they want to stop. Like, I don't think they're they're going to be run out.
And I'm excited for one thing. I am excited for is the X-Men. Like, Marvel will inevitably reboot X-Men, I would say, within the next 5 years or so, now that they have the rights to it. So even though there's
I think I read somewhere today that Feige was saying that he's looking to implement their new properties after he finishes the next phase. So it'll be a really interesting Marvel world to see what it looks like, even, once they start to bring in new faces and stuff.
Right. Yeah, I would like to see them give X-Men something similar to the Avengers treatment. Of course, those won't be standalone movies building up into a team movie, but I would like to see them sort of treat those characters the same way, because the X-Men movies have been pretty inconsistent, going from just absolutely terrible to fantastic. So we wouldn't have gotten some stuff like Logan or Deadpool if it had always been in the MCU. But so I would like for there still to be an arena where we can get films like that. And I don't think they're going to mess with Deadpool, but I would like to have seen a more consistent base X-Men franchise, and I think hopefully we'll get that when they get a hold of it.
I think for sure in time that'll come. I am eager to see if they would be willing to introduce villains that are better known for other properties, and just kind of toy box it,
Mm-hmm.
like to see like Spider-Man face square up against Doctor Doom, you know,
Yeah.
or the Guardians of the Galaxy have to deal with Galactus, you know, or stuff like that. But of course, Galactus is probably another Avengers worthy
Right.
villain. But I mean, I think that would just be fun. It's I don't have any ideas other than that about how to make that happen. But I will say I pretty much implicitly trust them at this point. After 18 films, they haven't let me down. So that's a pretty good record. I'd say it's unprecedented. Um, not everyone has been like, oh, this is the best movie ever, but every single one of them has been worthy of the mantle of the MCU, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, like as we're closing this out here, like the mental image that just came to my mind is the meme of the guy walking with the girl and looking back at the other girl. So it's basically like us
always looking
with
at DC.
with the DC girl
looking.
Yeah, us with the DC girl looking back at the Marvel girl.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I know in the business world, you can look to your competitors and see, or look to the leaders in the industry to see what they're doing. But man, oh man, yeah, doesn't look like they're learning their lesson.
Right. All right. Well, Stephen, I appreciate you joining me, and I think we're gonna make this a pretty regular little adventure online here. So
yeah,
we'll have
dude.
to
Well,
figure out what we're gonna do for next week.
Thanks for inviting me on. I promise to anybody who watches this, I'll be much more lively next time. Once I beat whatever it is that has just attacked me, attacked my immune system this evening. So
yeah. Well, we're almost out of winter, so
maybe we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll be back sometime soon.
All right. Later, guys.